When my friend asked me to hang out with him and a couple of ladies he met off Facebook, I happily accepted. I figured starting the weekend by meeting new people would be cool. I didn't find it strange that the ladies wanted to switch locations last minute. I shrugged it off. Maybe they felt more comfortable at their own place. The evening was going well. We were all sitting around conversing when all of a sudden masked intruders dressed in black stormed in, armed with bats, knives, and guns, and even a chainsaw. I sprinted towards the doorway and was shot in the leg. I'd later learn my femur was completely broken in half. At this point, I was clubbed on the back of the head and dragged into the bathroom with my friend. They took our ATM cards and phones. From there, we were threatened and tortured for hours. I felt like I was in a movie, but this was real life. They poured flammable liquids on us and threatened to light us on fire. They made me call my financial institutions to raise the limits on my accounts, but because it was the weekend, I couldn't. I figured we were only being kept alive until Monday when banks opened, and they could increase the limits on my bank card. As me and my friend lay in pain and agony on this small bathroom floor, I could hear men and women in the next room enjoying a football game. I couldn't believe they were partying and having a good time, while people lay in the room next door, potentially dying. By sundown on Sunday, I knew I was going to die. My body was broken, and I had nothing left. But then I heard multiple explosions. It sounded like someone was burning down the house. It was SWAT coming to save us. I later learned that my friend had been wrongly identified as the person who robbed local drug dealers weeks earlier. I was collateral damage. The assailants used the girls to lure us to the house that night. I endured the worst weekend of my life due to mistaken identity. It was 11:45 at night on a Friday, February 22nd, 1946. Jimmy Hollis and his girlfriend, Mary Larry, parked on a secluded road known as Lover's Lane after having seen a movie together. The area was about 50 feet off Richmond Road on an unpaved street, about 100 yards from the last row of city homes. Around 10 minutes later, approximately 11:55 p.m., a man wearing a white cloth mask, which resembled a pillowcase with eye holes cut out, appeared at Hollis's driver's side door and shined a flashlight in the window. Unsure if the man was pranking him, Hollis told him he had the wrong person, to which the man responded, "I don't want to kill you, fella, so do what I say." Both Hollis and Larry were ordered out the driver's side door. The man ordered Hollis to take off his goddamn britches. After he complied, the man struck him in the head twice with a pistol. Larry would later tell investigators that the noise was so loud she initially thought he had been shot, when it had actually been his skull fracturing. Thinking the assailant wanted to rob them, Larry showed him Hollis's wallet to prove he had no money, after which she was struck with a blunt object, presumably the assailant's pistol. The assailant ordered her to stand, and when she did, told her to run. Initially, she tried to flee toward a ditch, but the assailant ordered her to run a different direction up the road. Larry spotted an old car parked off the road but found it empty and was again confronted by the attacker, who asked her why she was running. When she responded that he had told her to do so, he called her a liar before knocking her down and sexually assaulting her with the barrel of his gun. After the assault, Larry fled on foot, running a half mile to a nearby house. She attempted to call for a car passing the residence, but was ignored. Larry was able to awaken the residents of the house and phone the police. Meanwhile, Hollis had regained consciousness and managed to flag down a passerby on Richmond Road. The motorist left Hollis at the scene and drove to a nearby funeral home, where he was able to call the police. Within 30 minutes, Bowie County Sheriff W.H. Bill Presley and 3 other officers arrived at the scene of the attack, but the assailant had already left. They found Hollis's pants 100 yards away from the parked car. Larry was hospitalized overnight for a minor head wound. Hollis was hospitalized for several days to recover from multiple skull fractures, but both survived the attack. Hollis and Larry gave conflicting reports to law enforcement as to what their attacker looked like. Larry claimed the man was wearing a white bag over his head with cutouts for the eyes and mouth, and that she could see under the mask, and that he was apparently African American. Hollis alternately claimed the man was white and around 30 years old, but conceded he could not distinguish his features as he had been blinded with a flashlight. Both agreed that the assailant was around 6 feet tall. Law enforcement repeatedly challenged Larry's account and believed that she and Hollis knew the identity of their attacker and were covering for him. The suspect, later dubbed the Phantom Killer, would go on to attack 6 more people within the next 10 weeks, leaving 5 dead and 3 injured. The Phantom Killer committed 2 double murders, and his final crime ended with 1 casualty and 1 person severely wounded. The Phantom Killer has never been caught. Young Whitney Bennett could not have known that leaving her bedroom window unlocked before she went to bed on the night of July 4th, 1985 would lead to her being viciously attacked. This innocent mistake would lead her to a night of pure terror and a lifetime of suffering. That night, Richard Ramirez, also known as the Night Stalker, crept through her bedroom window and savagely beat her with a tire iron before ransacking her room and taking all the valuables. The only thing the young girl could be thankful for was that the first blows quickly rendered her unconscious, though the strangulation marks which were found on her neck after the attack indicated that luck was truly on her side that night. 2 nights later, Ramirez perpetrated an almost identical attack against another woman, Joyce L. Nelson, in her home. This time, the attack was fatal. The crime scene Ramirez left behind him was covered in Whitney's blood, and his bloody shoe print was found on her comforter. He had also carelessly left the tire iron on her bedroom floor. As for Whitney Bennett, she was left with permanent scarring from the attack and had to undergo extensive cosmetic surgery. It was her testimony that helped convict Ramirez of his crimes during his trial and ensured that he received the death penalty. He ended up dying in prison of natural causes at the age of 53 before the execution could take place. I went to Somalia in early 2012 to write about a Somali pirate gang jailed in Hamburg. I thought after the trial, it would be a prime time to write a book on a Somali pirate gang. I traveled with an award-winning filmmaker who arranged security with a Somali elder. During the trial in Hamburg, we heard how the pirates casted themselves as poor, misunderstood fishermen. The sentiment was prevalent within the old supply town we arrived in. I interviewed a Somali leader named Khalif. He explained how the Somali people were victims of white people's overfishing and illegal dumping. After days in Somalia, we were done with our work and beginning to wrap up. I had a few loose ends to tie up and told my travel partner he could head back. Normally we would not separate like this, but I thought with it being the end of the trip and us having no hiccups thus far, what would be the harm? On our way back to the hotel, we were surrounded by pirates pointing guns. They demanded our surrender as they fired guns in the air and approached. I was immediately pulled out of my vehicle, hit in the face, and thrown in the back of the pirates' vehicle. I was horrified as we traveled through small towns, while I was thinking about the burden I was about to become to my family. We arrived at a camp where there were other hostages being held. I could see nothing. My glasses were broken during my kidnapping, and everything would be blurry the rest of my time held captive. Upon arriving at the camp, I pleaded with my captors that they had made some type of mistake. I explained how I was just a reporter, that I had done nothing wrong, and that people would be looking for me. To my surprise, the pirates knew exactly who I was. They Googled me upon arriving at the hotel. My captors showed me an article I had written for the New York Times and equated this to me being famous/valuable. I had been researched. It was here I realized that we had been betrayed by that Somali elder. I was given bread, a bottle of water, and tuna. That would be my diet for the next several months. In 2 months, I lost 40 pounds. Over the next few months, I moved constantly. We would hear helicopters overhead, which spooked the guards. They believed it was American military looking for me, but no one ever came. I had the impression my captors had no real plan and was making things up as they went along. They had no clear plan on getting a ransom or giving me back. They just kept making outrageous demands. About a month into my capture, I was dragged in front of the pirate leader and his lieutenant. I was handed a phone, and on the other end was an American hostage negotiator. He asked if I was being tortured or anything like that. I replied no, although I was routinely beaten by one of the guards. The negotiator connected me to my mom in the States, and it was the best thing I'd heard in weeks. Ultimately, the phone conversation would turn out to be fruitless. The pirates wanted too much. Even the negotiator sounded taken aback by the $20 million ransom request. That night, I felt more hopeless than ever. I tried to imagine a scenario where armed forces would burst in and save the day, but knew it wasn't realistic under the circumstances. As time passed, the guards started to grow frustrated about the lack of progress with the ransom negotiations. They asked me why my country was unwilling to pay. I tried to inform them that $20 million was too much and that my family couldn't afford it and the United States wouldn't pay it. As the weeks turned to months, I could feel myself losing my grip on reality. I could also feel my humanity slipping away and being replaced by hatred. Where I was being held, I was surrounded by assault rifles that were left laying around by the guards. I would fantasize about grabbing one and taking out as many guards as I could before turning the gun on myself. But I rationalized killing myself would be a permanent loss to my friends and family. The morning of the 13th of September was no different than the days past. But after breakfast, I was handed a phone. There was a mysterious negotiator on the line. I was given 30 seconds to talk to him. In that time, he was able to explain nothing before the phone was ripped out of my hands. Proof of life, the captors yelled into the phone. From there, I was told to pack. I could feel the enthusiasm in the camp I was being held in as I gathered my things and was led to a waiting car. Once in the car, I was handed a phone. It wasn't just a negotiator on the phone, it was also my mom. They were telling me that the ransom was paid and that I was coming home. It was a whirlwind romance. They were having the time of their lives. The only problem was, that wasn't his wife. He dreaded telling her, but he knew he wanted to make things right. The father of 5 wanted his wife back, but to do so, he had to break it off with his mistress. When Miguel broke the news to Paula that their affair was over, she was devastated. But he did what he had to do to save his family. Paula stewed over the breakup for a few days. She wasn't happy with how things ended, and she reached out to Miguel asking if they could meet one final time. Miguel obliged, and on a foggy October night, the two met up. Miguel was stern and forceful with his refusal to continue their relationship. As Miguel started to leave, Paula pulled out a knife and stabbed him, leaving Miguel to die. Miguel and Paula's affair was well known throughout the town, making Paula an immediate suspect in Miguel's death. She was arrested and tried, where she pled not guilty because her actions were a crime of passion. The all-male jury didn't buy it and found her guilty of premeditated murder and sentenced her to death by hanging. On the morning of Paula's execution, no gallows were available, so she was instead tied to a cottonwood tree and placed on a wagon attached to a team of horses. The county sheriff and executioner didn't want to tie her arms, so when the wagon began moving, she was able to grab hold of the noose. The sheriff attempted to pull her downward, but the crowd prevented him from doing so and cut her free. There was potential for a riot, as some in the crowd believed that she was entitled to be released. But order was maintained, and the second attempt was successful. It is believed that Paula was the first woman ever executed by the state of New Mexico. 18-year-old Mary Ruth was miserable. Her dream was to make it to Hollywood, but she was stuck waitressing in Kentucky. She married a husband, but never loved him. She knew it, and he knew it. So when she purchased a bus ticket to Texas, she wasn't surprised he didn't put up a fight. Mary quickly got a job waitressing at a local diner with the goal of saving enough money to buy a bus ticket to California. It was in this diner she struck up a conversation with a young man who called himself Red. Mary didn't find Red particularly attractive, or personable for that matter, but Red was a big talker. Red told Mary he had just gotten out of the army. He bragged about potential business dealings he had in California and family he had right outside of Hollywood. And this is what really piqued Mary's interest. Mary told Red about her intentions of becoming a Hollywood actress and how she was only working at the diner until she could save enough for a bus ticket. It was Mary who would ask Red for a ride to California in exchange for gas money there. Red obliged, stating that if she filled up once now, he would take care of gas the rest of the way. Mary was excited as she was so close to living her Hollywood dream. The two filled up Max's truck and were off. They first just needed to stop to see a family member who owed Red money. Mary stayed in the car as Red approached a lady in her front yard. She didn't look happy to see Red. After a little back and forth, Red stormed back to the car. He screamed about family not being there for him and that he would show them he could get his own money. He then pulled out a gun, stating, This will get me anything I want." Mary was terrified at this point. Red calmed her, telling her he had an uncle to see, and after that, they could go to California. Red's uncle was happy to see him, unlike his previous family member. Mary and Red were welcomed and invited to stay the night. Red's family invited them to the movies. Red didn't want to go, but Mary did. She enjoyed herself that night, and the next morning, they headed to California. Red stopped for gas and filled up, which was surprising because Mary knew he had no money. Red stated he was loaded and pulled out a wad of cash and told Mary to count it. It was $250, and it was the most cash Mary had ever held at one time. She asked if he'd gotten all this money from his uncle, but Mary knew the answer. Red laughed. "Everyone's getting their piece of the pie. I just took mine. There's plenty more where that came from. Just stick by me." Mary wanted out. This wasn't what she signed up for. Imploring Red to pull over, he snapped. His hand was around Mary's throat before she even knew what happened. Mary couldn't breathe. He held on as he drove until Mary started to see black. He finally let go, saying, "You started this trip with me. You will end this trip with me." Mary sat silent, glad she could breathe again. From this point forward, Red wouldn't let Mary out of his sight. Neither got very much sleep. Mary begged to be let go. Red said he would once they had gotten to Los Angeles. By this time, Mary had been up for 48 hours. She asked if she could rest in the back seat. Red agreed, and Mary fell asleep hoping her nightmare would end soon. As Mary woke, she heard a shot and knew she wasn't dreaming. Red frantically hopped in the car and threw a stack of cash at Mary to count. Mary was frantic, while Red explained he didn't mean to kill him. It was an accident. Red had shot and killed the convenience store clerk while trying to rob the store. The two would eventually pull over because something was wrong with the car. They went to a local mechanic to get repairs. While Red was in the car, Mary told the mechanic that they were the couple that were on the radio for the convenience store shooting. The mechanic shrugged it off, completed the repairs, and Red and Mary were back on the road. After driving for some time, the two stopped at a diner to grab something to eat. "Where is it?" Red demanded. Mary was lost. She had no idea what Red was referring to. "Where's the gun?" Mary promised she didn't have it. Red looked everywhere. Mary excused herself to the bathroom. What Red didn't know was while the mechanic was fixing the car, he'd found Red's gun. The mechanic had indeed taken Mary seriously. In the bathroom, Mary waited. An hour went by. Red was pacing back and forth in the diner. Another hour passed. Mary peeked out the bathroom. Red was now pacing outside. 30 minutes after that, Red was gone. Mary ran straight to the police station, telling them everything that happened to her.